Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create this animation, which is a sort of a simulation or animation of sound waves or light waves bouncing off of objects. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, I will be using version 2.82 for this tutorial, but keep in mind the process is almost identical regardless of which version of Blender you are using. Also, one other thing I want to point out, I have mine set up so I have right click to select. Some people have theirs set up for left click to select, and I believe it defaults to left click to select. So if I say right click to select and you have yours set up to left click to select, just ignore what I'm saying at that moment. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and press 7 to go on the top side view, and I want this in orthographic view, so I pressed 5 on the keypad. I'll go ahead and turn on screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, now we're going to start off by adding a plane. Add mesh and then plane, and I'm going to scale this up by a factor of 10. S for scale, and then 10, enter. Then I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and since we are working with physics objects, we will go ahead and apply the scale, because right now, see, the scale should always be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, which if it's not showing 1, 1, 1, 1, we have not applied the scale. So I'm going to press Control A, and it brings up this menu, and then click on scale. Alright, now I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to come up here to edge select, and then I'm going to click on subdivide, and then down here in this little window I'm going to change this from 1 to 75. And the reason why we're doing this is just to make it a little bit simpler with what we're going to be doing next. Alright, now come up here and put this on face select, and then press A once or twice until nothing is selected. May have to press it quickly. Alright, now I'm going to select all the what we're going to do right here. We're going to create the walls for the sound waves to bounce off of. So we're going to use the box select in order to select the faces we want. We're going to go ahead and select every face around the perimeter. So press B for box select, and then left click and drag just to select the outer ones, and then do the same thing on all 4 sides. Simple enough. Now we need to create some internal walls. Now I'm not going to create a whole bunch of them and make it complicated, because I'm just showing you the process. So just pick, it doesn't matter where you create your walls. Use your imagination. Make it as many walls as you want, but I'm only going to put a few. I'm going to put one right here. I'm just going to, you can also make it wider than one row also. I'm just making them thin. And then I'm going to put another one right here. And then, of course, I'm using B for box select, and left click to drag. Alright, that's all the walls I'm going to put in this simulation. Now press 1 to go in the front side view, and you're basically looking at an infinitely thin plane. So since we have all those faces selected, we're going to, now with it down like this, we're going to press E, the letter E for extrude, and then Z, and then 0.5 pardon me, not 0.5, just 1. So let's just cancel that. Alright, now press E for extrude, Z, and then 1. Alright. I don't know why I said 0.5. Must have had a brain fart. Alright, now this is our basic walls. We're done with this. Of course, again, your layout doesn't have to be like this. It can be however you want. But it's important that these internal walls are the same height as the external boundary. Hope that makes sense. Alright, I'm going to press tab to exit edit mode. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put it in wireframe so we can see what's going on. I'm going to press 7. And because we are in orthographic view, it's kind of hard to see the walls. So if I press 5 to exit orthographic view, then we can sort of see where the walls are better. At this point, we want to go ahead and apply physics properties to this plane. So we need to, with this selected, come over here to the physics tab, click on collision, and then make sure dampening is set to 0. Random, make sure all of these are set to 0 essentially. And if it's set to 0, you're good to go. Alright, now we need to create some particles, or a particle, and this particle will be the actual particles that make up the sound wave or the light wave, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to press 1 to go into front side view, and then I'm going to press add mesh, and then I'm going to choose a sphere. And this sphere, I'm just going to press G for grab, Z for the Z axis, and then drag it down here underneath. And now I'm going to go back into top side view, or top side view by pressing 7. Alright, now we need to create an emitter. The emitter is going to be an object that's cylinder shaped. So we need to add a cylinder. Add mesh and then cylinder. Now we don't want the cylinder, well, we could use a cylinder this large, but we don't really need it to be that large. So I'm just going to press S for scale and then 0.25, enter. Alright, now I'm going to press 1 to go into front side view, and now I'm going to go into orthographic view so we can see what's going on better. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we need to press G for grab and then Z for the Z axis, and then just bring it up to about midways. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now over here, right here, these are not set to 1, so we need to apply the scale because this will be part of a physics object. So press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Alright, now we need to edit this a little bit in edit mode. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on solid view and then press tab, and then make sure this is on face select. Select this top face and then press delete, and then choose faces, and do the same thing with the bottom face. Press delete and delete that face. So now we are left with only a hollow cylinder, which is exactly what we want. Alright, now go ahead and exit edit mode. Now at this point, I actually did make a little bit of a mistake. So I'm going to use this as a mechanism to show you the effect of the number of faces this has on the wave. I guess that's probably the best way to explain it, because I actually meant to put a whole bunch of faces around this, but I'm going to do it both ways, and just to show you the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and press 7 to go in the top side view, and since it kind of disappears, I'm going to put it back in wireframe, and exit orthographic view by pressing 5. Alright, now we can put this cylinder anywhere we want. All we have to do is press G for grab and then just put it wherever we want. In this case, I'm just going to put mine here. You put yours wherever you want, just as long as it's not intersecting one of the walls or the floor. And you can always, like right now, I know it's not intersecting the floor because if I press 1, go into 5 for orthographic view, I can see that it's not. So, alright, now we need to give this object some a particle system. So click on the particle system tab, click plus, and then right here, this is the number of particles we want to generate. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just say 3600. And then right here, we want all the particles to be generated in frame 1 because we want the particles to basically explode out from the center. And then just turn this lifetime up to a high number. I'm just going to turn mine up to 1000. The number isn't important, just as long as it's longer than what your animation is going to be. And then on the source, make sure it's set to faces. Distribution, change it to random. And turn off random order, but keep even distribution selected. Now, come down here to the render panel. Change this from halo to object. And then right here, the instance object, that's the sphere we created earlier. So click on that and then just choose sphere. And that's essentially just telling the particle system that each particle is going to be this sphere. Alright, of course it's not going to be this size, it's going to be the size that we dictate down here, which right here it's set to 0.05, and then right here in the viewport display set this to point, and the reason why we're setting this to point is because it will calculate quicker. And then set this also to 0.05, enter. And right here in the render settings, uncheck show emitter. That way our emitter, the cylinder, does not actually show in the renders, but the particles do. Alright, now one other thing, up here in the physics tab, make sure this is set to Newtonian. That's what we want. And it will actually calculate quicker. And then right here on deflection, set this to size deflect. Alright. Now, I do believe that's it. Now, all I did was close the molecular script panel because we're not using that. Oh, one more thing. We need to click on this field weights, change the field weights on the gravity, set it to 0. Basically, I'm just telling it that I do not want the gravity to affect these particles. And I want to explain a little bit here. We have gravity turned off for the particles. Basically, gravity will not affect the particles. Up here, we have dampening set to 0. That way, there's like no wind resistance for the particles. And on the walls themselves, we have it set to no dampening. And the reason why we're doing that is because when a particle comes out and it hits one of these surfaces, we want it to bounce off at the same velocity that it hit that surface. That way it's not slowing down and the particles just continue to reflect. I hope that makes sense. Alright, now I'm going to go back to the emitter, and before we go any further, let's go ahead and save this project. File, save as, and I'm going to go ahead and create, where am I at? Right here. And I'm just going to name this one tutorial. can't type today for some reason. Tutorial. It ain't even spelled right. I'm such a goober. Alright, now we're pretty much ready to go. Let's go ahead and go back to the particle system and I'm just double checking everything to make sure we're good. Oh, one more thing. I almost forgot to mention this. Come up here to cache, because we have to turn this on. Otherwise, if we have a system with a low amount of memory, we could run into issues. So turn on disk cache. And at this point, I think we're good to go. I'm just going to click save one more time. And if I press play, all the particles come out and then they start bouncing off each other. Now this is the issue that I said I messed up. I made a mistake on earlier. See how spaced out the particles are from each other? That's what I needed to solve earlier. And that spacing, the number of groups that you see, is controlled by the number of faces you see on this emitter, because there is the only starting velocity that we have on this emitter is is set by this right here, the normal. We have 1 meter per second velocity on the normal. So basically the normal direction of each face, which is basically outward, it's shooting out at 1 meter per second, but there's only 32 faces, so it's only shooting out in 32 different directions. So that's why I was saying I messed up earlier. But now if you like that view or that look, by all means go ahead and use it. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this emitter and then change it so that we can make it what I view as proper, something with more faces. Alright, so what we're going to do, make sure you go back to frame 1, and then with this emitter selected, press Shift S and then choose cursor to selected. And the reason why I'm doing that is because whenever I create the replacement emitter for this, I want to put it back in the same exact place. Alright, with this emitter selected, I'm just going to press D or delete that, and then I'm going to press add mesh and then cylinder. Alright, now with this here, come over here to this panel and then change this to 3600. And essentially we just created a cylinder with 3600 faces, so that each face is only 0.1 degrees different than the face next to it. So now we're going to have a 3600 groups of particles, or 3600 directions that the particles can emit. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to press S for scale and then 0.25. Now we're doing it right. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and press, since these are not set to 1, I'm going to press Control A and apply the scale. I'm going to put this in solid view and then press Tab to go into edit mode and make sure I have it on face select. Select this top face, press delete and choose face, and then choose that bottom face, press delete and delete that face. So now once again we're left with just this hollow cylinder. And then I'm going to exit edit mode. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back in wireframe. Now we have an advantage here, because we had already created the particle system. We do not have to go back through and recreate it. All we have to do, make sure we have this cylinder selected, click on the particle system, click plus. But what we want to do, instead of adjusting all these again, just click right here and then choose the particle system we had before, which is going to start with 0. Now if we was to press play, now all the particles are coming out in 3600 different directions, so it looks way better than it did before, in my opinion. And of course you can right now it's only set to 250 frames, and of course if you wanted that to go longer than 250 frames, obviously just adjust this. But if for some reason you wanted to go more than 1,000 frames, you would have to adjust this to a higher number than 1,000. Alright, now I'm just going to press play and let it go through. Now hopefully your computer's keeping up with this. 3,600 particles isn't that much. Even a laptop should be able to keep up with this in real-time speed. Now while you do this, you want to kind of watch for particles that are actually going through the walls. In this case, it doesn't look like we're having any because the velocity is set to 1 meter a second, so it's still pretty slow. But if for some reason particles were going through the walls, what you would want to do is come down here in the particle system settings, and down here where it's integration, you would want to add some subframes. Now it's probably a good idea for accuracy to have probably 4 subframes anyway, but in this situation you probably don't have to have it, but it still wouldn't hurt to go ahead and add it. Now my computer's still going to keep up with 4 subframes, but with a laptop it's probably going to run a little bit slower than 30 frames per second, but that's fine. Now once you get it the way you want, which I want to say that's how I want it, all you have to do is once again just make sure you have disk cache selected, and then you want to go ahead and bake it, so press bake. Now don't do what I just done, save it before you click bake, otherwise it could crash and then you would have to redo all this again. So it's better off just to make sure you always save before you click bake. That's a hard lesson to learn, especially whenever you spend a long time trying to get everything organized, then all of a sudden it crashes and you lose your work. So that save button is your friend. And at this point you can press play and you can go ahead and set up your lighting if you choose. And for the camera, the easiest thing in my opinion, because I have this set up as a square, so for the camera I'm just going to press 0, set that to 0, set this one to 0, set this to 0, make sure this one's on 0, and then set this to 0. And then right here in the render tab, pardon me, the printer tab, change this to 1080, or the size doesn't have to match as perfectly, long as this number and this number match. And then if I look through it, and then if I take right here the Z and just raise it, left click to drag on that number on the Z axis to raise the to move the camera up in the Z axis, I can adjust it so that the camera is viewing only this area. Now I want to go ahead and go to the World Properties tab, and I'm just going to turn this off to complete black. And now I need to add a light. Here's a light that's default in the system. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. If you have one, you can go ahead and delete it too, and then we'll just start off from scratch. So I'm going to press A, or add, and then light, and I'm going to use an area lamp. And with this I'm also going to set this to the center, 0, and then and then 0 right here on the X and Y axis, that way it's in the center. And I'm just going to press 1 to go on the front side view, press 5 to go into orthographic view. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to put this light just behind the camera. So I'm going to press G for grab, and then Z for the Z axis, and then just move it up to just behind the camera. Doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as it's not over top the camera. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to the light panel and then adjust this probably to 5 meters because we want the shadows to be fairly soft. And then bump this up to probably 10,000. And I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of yellow to it so it's a little bit warmer of a light. And then if I go through press 0 to look through the camera, I can put this in rendered view, and then we can see real quick how much light there is. Now I don't have any color properties attached on this plane yet, which is fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave this white essentially, and I'm going to go over here to the sphere, and I'm going to give that a material, and the sphere is our particles. Now I'm going to give this a dark color just so we can see it easier, and I'm just going to make this pretty much all black. And I do believe we are just about ready. Now if I press play and I'm just going to go to a interesting looking spot, which I want to say that is, and then if I click render, which let me make sure my render settings are set up. Alright, we're good. Now if I click render, there you go. Simple enough. Now I want to show you one other thing, and this is let me show you the effect first. Now where am I at? I want to show you this effect, and I'm going to show you how to go about creating this because I really like the way this looks. See how I have several different rings coming out, and it kind of really seems like sound in my opinion. I want to show you how to create that. I'm not going to create that many rings, but I'm going to show you the process. Alright, now go back into 3D viewport view. I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I'm going to press 7 and then 5 to make sure I'm in topside view but not orthographic view. And I don't want to be looking through the camera when I'm doing this because I may accidentally move the camera, and it's just easier to not be looking through the camera. I'm going to actually temporarily hide the camera so that it's not blocking our view. And I'm going to select the cylinder that makes up the emitter. Now what I'm going to do before I go any further, I'm going to click on the particle system and then click delete bake. Alright, now I want to go ahead and duplicate this particle system because we want this particle system to emit particles more than once. We want it to we're going to have it duplicate or emit particles 3 times. So with this emitter or cylinder selected, I'm going to go ahead and rename this emitter. And I'm going to name the emitter 1. That way it's a little bit simpler. And we're going to go ahead and duplicate this twice. So press Shift D, enter, Shift D, enter. So now we have emitter 1, emitter 101, emitter 102. I'm just going to go ahead and rename this to 2. And I'm doing this just to make it simpler to follow. Alright, now if we look right here, we see that each one of these emitters have the same particle system. We want to separate these particle systems. So to separate it, all you have to do is just click this number and it's separated. Click this number or click on this one and click it, it's separated. Now when it separates it, it basically creates a duplicate of that particle system, same settings and everything. So this particle system is exactly the same as this particle system, but they are separate. Now what we want to do, we want this one to emit at frame 1 to create its particles at frame 1. Now we want this one to emit the particles a little bit later. So I'm going to have this set to, let's say, I want it to emit at frame 5, and set both of these to 5. And then this one, I want it to emit at frame 15. So frame 15, frame 15. And now we need to just check on one thing, make sure that disk cache is still selected for all of them. Come up here, save your project before you click bake. Of course, I'm not going to click bake, I'm just going to press play. And then there you go. So you can see how easy it would be to add even more duplicates of the particle system to create more rings. And if for some reason you wanted one of the rings to be one color and one of the other rings to be another color, we're already set up for it. All you'd have to do at this point, because see, let me go ahead and render this frames and show you what it looks like. Alright, now, but suppose I want this ring to be one color, this ring to be another color, and so on and so forth. It's simple. I'm going to keep emitter 1 with the black particle, but with I'll give this one a different color and this one a different color. I'm going to go ahead and press 1 to go in the front side view, and then click on this sphere, and I'm going to press Shift D and then Z for the Z axis and bring that down like that. Shift D and then Z axis and bring that down like that. Now once again, if we click on the materials tab, if we look right here, we can see that these are all three the same color and they are connected, which basically means if I change the color of this one, these two will change also. But what we need to do, we need to separate the colors, or separate the node group. Believe that's what it's called. We need to separate the node group. So just press that number, select this one, press that number, and now they're all the same color, but they are separated. And so now we can change this color without changing the rest of them. Hope that makes sense. So now I'm going to give this one, change this one to, let's say, kind of a dark red. And then change this one to kind of a dark blue. Alright, now come back over here to emitter 2. Go to the particle system. Scroll down to the render panel. Where are you at? Right here. And then change this from sphere to this one of the other spheres. Go to this emitter. Change this one to the third sphere. Alright, so in this case we have this emitter is emitting this particle. This one is emitting this particle. And this one is emitting this particle. Each one of these have a different color. So now I'm going to go ahead and press 7 to go on the top side view, and if I press play, you know, it's still showing the same color, you know, because this is just in the preview, and we have the viewport display set to point, so it does all this stuff quicker. But if I was to at this point click render image, then you're going to see the different colors: black, red, and blue. But anyway, I hope that tutorial was useful, and I hope I didn't butcher it up too much by making the little mistakes. One other thing that I forgot to mention: when you get ready to actually bake this, since you have multiple particle systems, what you need to do is, it doesn't matter which emitter you have selected, but you need to, whenever you bake it, it's a little bit different. Instead of just clicking bake, you need to click on bake all dynamics, and whenever you go to delete bakes, you need to delete all bakes. I hope that makes sense, because in this case I'm going to click bake all dynamics, and there we go, it's baking. But anyway, If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer your questions. Later, people.